Welcome everybody to the board of Damocles. I'm your host, Jim Buchanan. Tonight I'm going to talk about Anachrony, because Anachrony is my favorite game, and I've talked about it a lot of times on the channel. Well, maybe not a lot. I mean, there's really not that many videos, but either way, yeah, that's my favorite game. I love it. And tonight we're going to do a little bit of a teach and a review. Obviously, giving that away, it's my favorite game. It's great, but either way, yeah. So let's dive into it. All right, so first things first, let's talk about the setup real quick, because it is a complicated game to set up. It is a table hog, and there is no way around it. It is. Now, I have the Exosuits expansion, which gives you these miniatures, which are totally unnecessary, but awesome and completely necessary. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but really, I mean, seriously, they're awesome, and we'll get into that. I'll talk about why they're so awesome. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the things in the setup and why this game takes up so much space. Okay, so first things first, I've got this set up on the 4-player side. All right, you can see that by looking in the top right corner up there, and there's a little number 4. The other side says 2 and 3. It's also good for the solo play. I'm going to talk a little bit about the solo play at the end, but I'm going to have a different video where I actually go through the solo and why it's good. So let's start with what you need to do in this setup. And you're going to do almost all of this every round. So in the preparation phase of the game, which is the first phase of each game, you're going to flip one of these recruitment cards over, and you're going to flip one of these mining cards over. Now, the recruitment card tells you which types of recruiting resources are going to be available. In this case, it tells you 1 scientist, no engineers, 1 administrator, and 2 geniuses. If you look at the mining side, it's going to tell you to put out 2 gold, 2 uranium, and 1 titanium. Now, there's always a uranium, gold, and titanium out on the right side as the type of resource you get when you go to that spot, and then you get a choice of those. And I'll get into what all those actions are in a second, but you'll always have those out. These will be determined by those cards. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to put all of the super projects out, and I say all, it's not all. You're going to shuffle them, and you're going to pick 7. You're going to flip that first one over. At the beginning of each round, you'll flip the one over based on which era you're in. And yes, you'll put 7 era markers out, or tokens, or cardboard chunks, whatever you want to call them, chevrons, all right? So you'll put 7 of those out, and then you'll have, after the 4th one, you're going to have the impact marker there as well. So, all right, that's it as far as the game. You'll put the 2 breakthrough die out up here on this spot. You'll leave the paradox die close. You've got the buildings here on the right side. You're going to have resources wherever you want them. You'll have people resources wherever you want them, breakthrough tokens included. But that's pretty much it. Now, on the player board, it's a little bit different. Okay, so let's look at the player board. The player boards have an A and a B side. The A side is always the same. Everybody's looks the same. No matter what path you're playing, you've got the same stuff. The B side is where it changes things up a little bit, and it works a little differently. You have the same thing on the leaders, where you'll have an A side and a B side. There's actually 2 leaders in the base game for each faction. I've already put down the one that I want, but underneath where you put your leader, you're going to see what resources you start with. In this case, I start with 3 water. So I've got 2 out there right now. I'll slap another one there. You're going to start with 4 of the energy cores. I'm going to stick another one out there because I had 3 out there. You're going to start with 2 of the titanium, which are the gray resources, 2 of those wonderful uranium resources. I'll get another one out there, and 1 gold, which I've got. I start with no neutronium, which are these purple resources, but I don't start with any, so I don't get any. I'm going to start with 1 engineer asleep or tired, and I'm going to start with 2 scientists awake and 2 engineers awake. And that's just what it's telling me here. That symbol there with the eye open is awake. The symbol with the lashes that you see and the lid closed is tired. Oddly enough. Now, one of the great things about this game is the iconography. Now, there's a ton of it. No doubt about it. There is a ton, but I love it. I think it's great. You don't need to know any particular language to be able to play this game, as long as you can read the rules. Speaking of, the rules are fantastic. So on the back of this, there's an icon sheet. I photocopied this, and when I play, I hand that out to everybody. I hand one of these out and say, okay, here's all of the things that you need to know about what each of these icons means. They even break it down into categories. Workers, and they have icons associated with that. Resources, and those associated with that. Buildings, actions, and the like. So, it's pretty wonderful. All right, so that is the setup, though. It is really that simple. It's going to take you a little bit, because there's a ton of stuff. But you can set all those things up there. Now, let's go through the game and how you play. I did leave one thing out. Sorry. You need to put 5 in-game scoring cards up at the top. They can go anywhere else. I just put them up at the top because that's what the picture shows in the book. But there's 5 of them that show up at the top. And we'll talk about what those are at a later time. They are part of the wonderful iconography. Each one of those tells you exactly what it means. But I'll get to it as we explain some other things. So if we're looking at the phases of the game, the first phase is the preparation phase. The second phase is the paradox phase. The paradox phase doesn't happen in the first round because you haven't been able to create any paradoxes. So I'll get to that when I talk about the warp phase. So the next phase, phase 3, is the power-up phase. Now in power-up, you're going to decide how many of these exosuits you want to power up. Now why do you want to power up exosuits? Well, let's talk about the theme of the game, because I think that answers probably every question you're going to have. Okay, maybe not, but still, the way this game works, it's about time travel. It's about evacuating your people. It's worker placement. A lot of it. That's pretty much all of it. But it's got the Bill and Ted mechanic. And that is what I call the time travel piece. If you remember Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the first one, when they're looking for their dad's keys, and they're like, hey, look, we just really need the keys to my dad's car. Oh, well, you know what? Let's go back in time and put them right there. And hey, there they are. It's like that. If you need resources in the future, like water or neutronium or a powered up mech suit, you can send it back to yourself from the future. And you'll have it right now. And that's what we're going to talk about in the warp phase. So it's important to have these things, but these exosuits so that you can go out into the world. Why is that important? Because sometime in the future, it's actually after the 4th era, the asteroid is going to impact the Earth. And when it does, it's going to send shockwaves backward through time because it's got all this neutronium, which is the key ingredient to traveling through time. It's the thing we've all been missing. So because of that, and because you're going to go back in time, well, when that asteroid hit with all that material that allows you to travel back in time, it sent shockwaves of that impact back through time and space to before where we start the game. And it caused mass destruction on the Earth. And because of that, everything is just crushed and cratered, and the only way to get out to the surface is in these mechs because it's not livable out there. At least not for most of us. So what do? You go out there to purify water or trade with the nomads that are out there. Or you go out to construct new buildings to add on to your own habitat, or to recruit new workers from other paths or other areas, or to research and find breakthroughs. There's a lot of things you can do. You can mine resources. That's what you're doing in this game. That's really those actions, and I'll get into the detail of each one, but either way, it is wonderful. And part of the thing that I love about it is that time travel aspect. So let's get into the warp phase, which is the next one. At the beginning of each one of the warp phases, you're going to look through your warp tokens that you've got here, and they're all these triangular pieces here. They'll have the different resources you can get, except for the energy cores. You can't send an energy core back, but guess what? You can send a powered up mech, which is the same thing, because that's what you use energy cores for, unless you're using them to trade for neutronium, but we'll get to that. So either way, you can send a powered up mech back to yourself. You can send neutronium back, or you can send an administrator, or a scientist, or an engineer, or gold, or titanium, or uranium, or water. So you have all those things. You pick 0, 1, or 2, so to send back to yourself in the round. And when you do that, let's say you pick these 2, and you're kind of hide what you have because you don't want everybody else to know what you're doing. You hold out your hand like this, and you flip it over and you open it up, and everybody does at the same time. And you say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And you put whatever you're warping back to yourself here on the spaces for that era, and so does everyone else. That's the warp phase. And at that point, I chose 1 titanium and 2 water. I would take 2 water, and I would take 1 titanium and stick it in there. Now, anybody else would take their things too, and that's pretty great. Now, but most of the other players, except for the Path of Dominance, when you don't power up all your warp cores, you get water for those too. So that's important. One thing that it seems like we always forget is to take water. And I say that, I almost always play these guys, and they don't get water for some reason, but it seems kind of weird. They're squids. So, they don't need it, I guess. Either way. So that is powering up, and that's the warp phase. Now let's get back to the paradox phase in phase 2. Let's skip back up to that. So in the paradox phase, you look at that era, at each era in succession. So you starting with the first era, you look at it and you say, hey, who has the most paradox tokens there? And if it's you roll and you get a paradox token, right? So you'll take one of these paradox tokens and you'll put it right there on your track. If you ever end up with 3 of those, you're going to get an anomaly. That's a space that covers up one of your building spaces. And it's kind of like a husk or a shell of a building that you can't build on anymore, and you lose 3 points if you've got it at the end of the game. You can get rid of it, it's just costly. I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to building, right? So, what else have we got, right? So that's the paradox phase. If you're all tied with the same number of tokens there, 1, 2, 0, 0, you don't roll. If you're tied at 1 or 2, you all roll the paradox token. If you ever get 3 paradox tokens, you take your anomaly and you don't have to roll again. But you're going to roll for that one. You're going to roll for this era. You're going to roll for this era. However far you are, you're going to roll for each one. It can accumulate pretty quickly, and like I said, those are bad. Those aren't good. Now, they can help you if you're trying to evacuate and you have to fill up a section, but that's probably not the best way to fill up a section. So, and you're asking, what in the world? What do you mean evacuate? I'll get to that. That's after we have the impact after round 4. So then after the warp phase, we get to the action rounds phase. Now, starting with the player who has the first player token, determined randomly in the beginning, let's run through the actions you can do out on the board. So anytime you're going out on the board, you need to have a powered up mech suit. If you don't have a powered up mech suit, you can't go out on the board. It doesn't matter how many workers you've got, because you have to protect them. They have to go out there and be sheltered. So let's say I'm going to take one of my scientists. All right, we're going to take one of these scientists. We're going to put him into the mech suit, and yes, you saw it. I just slid it right in. Yeah, he's inside the mech suit now. It's so cool. Anyway, you take this powered up mech and you're going to go out there. Let's say we go out here to purify water. Okay. Well, guess what? If we look at that, it tells me I'm going to get 3 water. But if I send a scientist, looking at this icon, I get +1. So I would get 4 water for sending a scientist and a powered up mech suit out there. Now, that is not one of the spaces that's limited. As many times as you want to use it, you can. As many times as other people want to go there, you can. So symbols that look like that are like hexagon within a hexagon within a hexagon, like these, those are multi-symbols. That's one that everybody can go into. The bigger ones there. These smaller ones here, and I should probably say those are hexagons within hexagons within hexagons also. So forget I said that. Let's just say these big ones over here. Many people can go there. There's one more that shows up after the impact. But either way, looking at these icons, hey, guess what that is? That says that your scientist can get +1 water. It also says that an engineer and an administrator can go there. And that's purify water. This next one down here, trading with the nomads. Hey, a scientist, an engineer, and an administrator can go there. But guess what? There's one I haven't talked about, which is the genius, and it's because it's wild, which means not only can it go anywhere and do anything, they get the bonus. So if you sent a scientist up there to get 4 water, you could also have sent a genius up there to get 4 water, which is pretty great. I mean, they are geniuses after all. So if you were to, instead of going to go get water, and you were to go here and to do some trading with a scientist, you would get to move 1 time around. So if I said, I'm going to trade 3 water for, looking at the symbols here, I could take the 3 water, put those in. I could either get 2 resources of my choosing, not neutronium, but of the others, or an energy core. So hey, I'll take another energy core. Why not? So take an energy core. If by chance, though, I had sent an administrator, I would get to do a couple of times around and get 1 more trade action. That's pretty awesome. So that's those 2 actions. That's trading with the nomads. That is purifying water. So looking at these 3 actions here, these 3 columns here, these are all somewhat related in a way. So if I'm to go here, this is doing research. Research is going to let me get one of these breakthroughs, which come in squares and circles and triangles. The shapes are important. If you notice on this super project, it's saying, hey, a square DNA. And yeah, they all have symbols on them. There's 5. There's the people, the time, the target, the DNA, and the microchip. Not sure if that's what they're actually called, but that's what I call them. So if you have square DNA, then you can build this super project. Only 1 super project per round comes out. Once you built it, it goes onto your player board. We'll talk about how you do that in a minute. But there's a cost there on the right side of what you would have to do. But in this case, it's a square DNA, or it's a triangle of anything, and it could be a circle of anything. So they tend to balance each other out. But when you go here to this space, you pick which one you want it to be. Let's say I want a square. I don't care what square. I just want it. That's a square microchip. You roll the other one. So I take square microchip. And now that's mine. Cool, huh? So you can say, you know what? I didn't really care. I wanted DNA. Yeah, I could have done that. I could have gotten square DNA. Hey, if I really wanted that super project, that probably would have been better. Go for DNA, because the triangle and the circle don't really care. So, all right. So that's research. In this first spot, notice you don't pay anything. If you go to this second spot down, which I wouldn't recommend if this one's not taken, but if you have to go here, you pay 1 water. If you have to go here, you pay 2. See how there's a shadow under the water? That means you have to pay. That's what it means on all those resource icons. So let's move over to the next one. That's recruit. I can't go there with a scientist. See how it says that? Kind of going back over here to research, it says a scientist can do this, but no one else can. So a scientist and a researcher, or excuse me, a scientist and a genius can go here, but an engineer and an administrator cannot. Here the scientist can't go. The engineer can go, but can't recruit geniuses The administrator can go here and can recruit anybody. So if I go here to this spot, I can choose which one of these I want to recruit. If I choose a scientist, I get 2 water. If I choose an engineer, I get an energy core. If I choose an administrator, I get a victory point. If I choose a genius, I get to choose between those 3. And the same thing, 1 and 2 water to go to those next spaces. The next one over is build. Now, a scientist can build, an engineer can build, but they get a 1 titanium discount when they do. An administrator cannot build. So same thing, 1 water, 2 water, and that one's free. And this symbol here is showing you that you can build 1 building of the buildings that are showing in the furthest most left space of whichever the appropriate track is. I'll talk about what those tracks are here in just a second. The other symbol here is telling you that you can build one of these super projects if it's been flipped over. You can build those, and that covers up 2 spaces, and it covers up the leftmost 2. Now, the other 2 spaces that you see up here are the World Council spaces. Those are also spaces that are in these columns in that you can choose to do one of those 3 actions when you go here. Okay, if you go to this one, you pay 1 water to go there. So it might be worth going there before you go to the bottom space here and have to pay 2 water. The other space over here that costs you 2 water, same thing. You get to choose between the 3. But if you go there, you can choose to use it as an action, or you can get the first player token. However, if there's someone already occupying this space, you get both. Why you would go here and not here when this is open, unless you just want the first player token, I don't really know. So go there, get both, as long as the 1 water space has been taken. Let's go back to building. All right, so there are 4 different kinds of buildings plus the anomaly. There are power plants, okay? That's the yellow. They've got a little lightning symbol in them. Those allow you to go back in time. I'll talk about how those work in a second. Then there are the factories. The factories give you resources. Sometimes you have to put things into them in order to get other things out of them, but that's what they do. Then there's the life support. Life support is almost always about water. And then the last one is the lab. The lab is interesting things that augment the other things. And again, I'll explain some of those here in just a second. All right, so when you go there and you want to build, let's say I send a scientist there, or better yet, let's talk about it from since it's a bonus action, let's talk about sending an engineer there. So we send an engineer here, and we're going to build. Okay, if I'm going to build, and I'm looking at what is face up, now one of the things that you do at the end of the round, or at the beginning of the next round, is you're going to take these buildings, and you're going to take the topmost ones, and you're going to put them here next to what you've got, okay? That's important because now you have 2 choices. If someone were to say, oh, I really like this one, and they build this one, you still have 2 choices because the one underneath becomes available, okay? So let's just go ahead and build this power plant. Let's say we went there and we were gonna build the power plant. I'm covering up this space. Because I'm covering up this space with this power plant, that's gonna cost me 1 neutronium, 2 titanium, and 1 water. However, I used an engineer, so it's going to cost me 1 neutronium, 1 titanium, and 1 water. But I don't have any neutronium, so I wouldn't be able to do this one. But I could do that one, and that would cost me 1 titanium to be able to do that. And for 1 time, I would get 8 waters. Okay? Now, these other 2, I'll explain some of those in a minute when I talk about free actions and why those have circles on them. And I'll talk about this one right now. So this one, if you notice, these shapes, the outline here, is the same as this. You don't have to use there's no requirement to use an engineer. You could also use a scientist. But that scientist, if you were to go to the power plant, would require 1 gold be paid. The scientist would go there, and you would be able to go back in time. Now, if we were at a later era, let's say, I would be able to go back as much as 3 eras and be able to pay 2 water, or let's say 1 titanium, to be able to take that titanium piece off. And when I do, I move up 1 on the time travel track. That's one way to do that. I would also get 1 victory point. Hooray! So that's the time travel piece. You're sending resources back. The other thing you can do, if you were in, let's say we were already in this era, the other thing I could do would be move my focus token back there, go here, and build that super project if I wanted to. So you can build super projects in times past if you go back to them. All right, so you have to move your focus back. The way to do that are these yellow buildings. Okay, I mentioned what the factory buildings do. This one, for example, gets you energy cores whenever you put an engineer there. Now, notice I can put that there and I don't have to send out an exosuit, right? I don't have to put this person in an exosuit. Anytime you see this symbol that has the outline of your human resources, so anytime you see that, you can do that. You can use them over here to the side, and you don't have to send them out to the workforce. The last action we have on the right here is mining. So mining you can do with a scientist or with an engineer. Now notice that symbol, that little arrow with an eyeball, that's telling you that the engineer will come back awake. Now this is an important concept. This is similar in some ways to what Ryan Lockett does in a lot of his games, where your workers do things and they come back, they're tired, they need rest before they can perform again. But in this case, they're not just resting. In this case, they would come back to you and they'd come back tired. In order to wake them up, you would pay, right now, let's say I'm at 0, I would pay 4 water because that's under my morale token right there. I would pay 4 water to wake them up. I'd move this over. That would, at the end of the game, get me 2 victory points. I pay my 4 water. I take everybody on the left side and move them to the right. It's pretty great. That's refreshing your workers. And that's that symbol there, kind of the hands like that. The other option is I don't have the water. And when I did that, now my faction is a little different. Everybody else has to use a worker right there in order to do it. And if you use an administrator, it comes back awake. But in my case, I could use a free action to do it. A free action does not count as my action to do the things on the board, but I can, if I wanted to, do the free action, and everybody can do this, to force your workers awake. So you're not refreshing them. And if you do so, you lose morale, which means you lose victory points at the end of the game. If you get all the way to the left and you do it again, you kill a worker, so you have to sacrifice somebody if you do that. If you get all the way to the right and you do it again, you refresh them nicely and you wake them up, you get 2 victory points. And every time you do it, you'll get 2 victory points. Up here, this piece, these are the 2 that slide around, this morale track and the time travel track. And as you're moving across the time travel, the number of victory points you get will increase. So, sending stuff back is a good thing. So borrowing stuff is a good thing. You just don't necessarily want to have to roll the paradox die, but that's how, if somebody else has 2 on there and you have 2, you could send something back and do it. Now you can't send things back to the present time, you have to send them back to the previous time. So you have to be at least 1 era forward of the resources you want to send back. Okay, so that's time travel. That's how these work. That's the idea of free actions. That's waking people up. That's refreshing them. That's doing all that. Well, my goodness, how do we score points in this game? Because that is the name of the game, right? It is. So you score points by looking at your buildings. At the bottom left, they've got points. All right. How else do we score? These tracks, you'll score that way. How else do we score? Well, some of these buildings will give you victory points. That's another way. How else can we score victory points? Well, you can, after impact, evacuate workers. I'll get to that one in just a second. Okay, the other thing are those in-game scorings, okay? Let's look at that top one. The top one up there on the left says that my time travel marker is the furthest to the right. If you have the furthest right to the right, you get 3 victory points. If you're tied, you get 3 victory points. You both get them. The next one over is the most water. The next one over is the sum of all your buildings that can send people back in time, however far back you can send it, if you have the most send back power, if you will, you get 3 victory points. If you've got the most workers, you get 3 victory points. If you have the most breakthroughs, you get 3 victory points. Now, what's not pictured there is if you have a set of triangle, circle, square, you get 1, 2, 3 victory points, 1 for each of these, and a bonus of 2 victory points for the set. So each one of these you have is worth a victory point at the end of the game. You spend these if you're building a super project, but nonetheless, each one of these that you have at the end of the game is worth a victory point. If you have a full set, it's worth 5 victory points. Okay? So, how else can you score? Well, there's a few different things, right? Okay, they give you a fancy, handy-dandy scorecard to look through here. So, all right, so looking at this one, you get points for your buildings. I mentioned that. You get points for your super projects. They're worth more points. 6 points, 8 points, 4 points. These are worth 3. 1 or 2 of these might be worth 4. Then you figure out how many points you lost for anomalies. So if you still had anomalies here, then you would lose points for those. I didn't explain kind of how those, once they go, let's say I was to put one here and I said, I'm going to put it here, which I can. It's legal to put it anywhere you want. You just can't put it further to the right than the furthest most building, right? So it has to be touching another building and it has to go farthest to the left. So if I were to put it here, in order to get it off, I would have to put a worker here and pay 2 regular resources or 1 neutronium and 2 water, and then I would kill the worker that I put there to take this off. Quite pricey. So, that's how that works, right? So time travel, again, however far this way you are, determines how many victory points you get. Morale, however far this way you are, determines your victory points. Again, breakthroughs, victory point tokens that you've got, right? And at the end of the game, you have what's called unwinding the continuum. All right. When I unwind the continuum, I'm basically saying, hey, I need to pay these. This is the only token I had left on there. I need to pay those 2 back. I get no bonus for doing that. I'm not really going back in time, although I am, but I don't get a bonus for doing it at the very end of the game. Okay? So I don't move my marker when I do that, but you will unwind those. So for each thing you're not able to unwind that's still left out there, you lose 2 points. Okay, and then you track those final ones and you end up with a number of victory points. Scored 72 in the last one. It wasn't terrible. All right, that's how you score. Now let's talk about evacuating, because at some point you're going to have impact, and that changes the game quite a bit. So when there's an impact, flip your handy dandy thing over and it'll tell you what to do. First thing it tells you to do is flip this card right here over. All right. So that's the first thing you do. That's where you go to evacuate. The rules on how you evacuate are found on your leader card. All right. So your leader card over to the right tells you that for my faction, for instance, it says I have to be all the way to the right in my morale. And if I am, I can evacuate. And when I do, I get 3 victory points. And then for every worker that I have, I get 1 more victory point. So however many total workers I've got, you can really add that one up. So not too bad. That's how this one works. There are others, and there's an explanation in the rule book for every single building, for every single super project, for every single leader, for every single B-side, for every single B-side leaderboard and A-side leaderboard. There's an explanation for everything in here. It is an excellent rule book. Extremely well done, easy to read and understand, actually enjoyable, and they made good use of the back by giving you all the icons. Super well done. Not to mention really great rules for the solo and really great rules for the Doomsday expansion and for all of the other expansions. They're just wonderful. Okay, so let's keep going with impact. So we do that. The next thing we do is we go look at these. We've got a whole bunch of these tokens. We've got more than is actually necessary in the game so that there's a little bit more variety. So you're going to look at these. This has a building symbol on it. So you're going to put it out. Hey, there we go. This one also has a building symbol. All right. And there we go. And you're going to cover up each of these spaces so that it's going to say, it's going to tell you what bonus you get if you go there. Right? Okay, I'll talk through each one of these here in a second and explain what they do, but okay, so after impact, this is going to speed up the game just a little bit. You're going to go out here and you're going to do that action. When you take your mechs back, you take your exosuits back, you're going to flip over that token, and that is not a space you can go to anymore. If all of those tokens are flipped over, game end. If they're not flipped over, you keep playing. And you can keep playing all the way through the last 7th round, the 7th era. But if all of those get flipped over beforehand, that is the end of the game. So looking at this one, let's kind of run back over here down the left side there. Go there, that gets you 2 victory points. Go here, that lets you build a super project in addition to doing this. Go here, that lets you take 2 of these paradox tokens off of your board. Go here, that lets you get an additional recruit with bonus. Here gives you a powered up exosuit. Here lets you move your morale tracker over to the right 1 more. This would get you a minus cost on your building for 1 of those resources. This would give you an 1, 2, or 3 victory points based on where you're able to build. So let's say I built another one of these gray buildings and I put it here. Yes, that's an anomaly, but I put it here, I would get 3 victory points. Pretty great. So those are all good. This one allows you to discount by 1 neutronium for whichever building you're doing. Notice there aren't any here in the mining. That's always there. But after impact, remember how I talked about neutronium being a big thing? When you're flipping those over from then on, you ignore those, the top one, and that symbol says after impact, you always put neutronium there. So neutronium will always be available once there is impact. Okay, so that's how that works. You send a guy up there, you meet those conditions that are here on your board, and that's how you evacuate. Your game's not over when you evacuate, you've just evacuated your people, which is a good thing. You can continue to do things and continue to strengthen your position and get more victory points. As a matter of fact, that's kind of the name of the game. So, any questions? No? Great. Okay, let's talk about some other things in the game. All right. So, first of all, I've got the Infinity Box. So I've got the one that has all the organizer stuff. It has the metal resources. It's got some really cool things for the expansion. It's got these they're just awesome. It's also got, if you wanted, it has the cardboard and it's got the plastic cubes and all that stuff. I had the plastic cubes originally. It's got these that are normally cardboard hexes for the energy cores. The water is the same. Nothing's changed about the water. The water is these little gems. Like I said, normally these are plastic cubes, but they're actually metal. They're not real titanium and gold or anything, and certainly not real uranium, I hope. It's my favorite game. I like to play it a lot. I hope not. So, but everything you see, really, there may be a cardboard replacement for it. Do you need the exosuits? No. But do they make the game better from a presence and being able to see that somebody is here? Yeah, absolutely they do. I think they are a much better tool. They're really a great addition. They enhance the gameplay for me. That may not be your mileage. Your mileage may vary. Right? It's different for everybody. But for me, that's what I like. I super enjoy those. And I love how the people fit in there. So that's kind of how the game is played. It's how it works. The components are pretty darn good. The miniatures are good. They have some nice detail. They're not incredibly detailed. They're not super crazy, but they are pretty good. There's some like Griffin with wings. There's some Primus looking things. I don't know what to say, but yeah, there's a few things. The solo mode is awesome. Yeah, so there's really nothing for me that I want to complain about in this game. Now, if you're looking at this going, man, that's a lot of stuff. It is. It is a lot of stuff. If you're looking at this saying that looks super complicated, it does look super complicated, but it's not. It's really not that bad. It's not much more difficult than viticulture. If you're familiar with viticulture, you plant grapes, you harvest those grapes, you put them on your crush pad, you make wine, you fill orders for the wine. And there's some other things in between, for sure. But it's a fairly simple game. This one, research stuff, recruit new people, build stuff, get resources, get water, trade resources for other resources. Yep, that's everything. It's not too bad. It looks like a lot. You have some things on your board to manage, places that you can send your workers to get extra things, ways to maximize your investment so that you can send more workers out, ways to freely wake people up or get more victory points by refreshing people. Now, the thing that I didn't mention is after impact for just about everybody, and I say just about because there is a leader that eliminates this, but everybody's going to have to do this. In this space, these first 3 spaces here are always free, except after impact. Those 2 go away, and you have 1 free exosuit that you can send out. These will always cost you energy cores. Energy cores will get very precious after impact. So, take a look at that. Figure out how much do you really want to spend, and do you want to go full on out? I gotta say, if you've got the people and you're winning, it does pay to spend those hex cores, those energy cores, to try to get that out before anybody else can garner up a bunch of points. You certainly don't want them buying or making some of these super projects that are worth 7 points, or that one's only worth 3, but you know, hey, there's one down there worth 8. Yeah, 5. It's a lot of points. So, something to think about. All right, well, that is Anachrony, the how to play. Components, like I said, I love them. In the Infinity Box, they're great. There is some real heft to these. And I love that in the original cardboard, or excuse me, in the original plastic ones, it was a color, but the way to distinguish if you are colorblind, if you're looking on the board, the way to distinguish them between each other is they have little markings on them. They've got lines or symbols. Like this one, the uranium, this one's a grid. It's got kind of 9 pieces all the way around it. It's pretty wonderful. It's incredibly well done. Graphic design is awesome. It's wonderful. Is there a lot? Yes. It's not that hard when you look at it. You really can figure it out pretty simply. Playing through it one time will be plenty. I think by the time you hit the 2nd or 3rd era, you'll have it figured out, if you don't have it figured out before the end of the 1st. Again, hand people those icons explained sheets, do photocopies, hand it to them. It helps a ton. Make sure you hand out these cards showing the different game phases. They explain what happens and what you do, and even down to phase 6, which is cleanup. And even when you're looking at these, it tells you what you get. Like for instance, the treasure hunter, Samira, which is the leader for the Path of Dominance, or one of the leaders, the one that I use, it shows you that in phase 6, the cleanup phase, you get 1 random resource, plus if you spend 2 water, another resource of your choosing. So that's pretty awesome. I like that. That is a pretty good benefit. There's others, like I said, there's other leaders. The other leaders all have different things too, but they go with their path or with their faction. So everything on your board will tell you what phase it can be done in if it's not in the regular round phase. Other things that you get, buildings or otherwise, that get you extra things, extra stuff, will tell you if it's not during the action round phase, which is phase 5, it'll tell you during phase 2 or during phase 3, you get this extra thing. So pretty awesome. I do love that. Incredibly well documented book, rule book and otherwise. The icons are wonderful. The art, I think the art's beautiful. I love the art from this game. I love the art from Chikarion. It's the same people. It's all Mind Clash. And that group of artists that they had created also did it, I believe, on Cerebria. It is great. Really, really well done. So I like it quite a bit. Everything's clear and easy to understand. So yeah, icons, graphic design, art, great components, great rulebook, great gameplay, great. There's my review for the game. Awesome. This is the Board of Damocles. Thank you for watching. Good night. This has been the Board of Damocles. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you like it. Put some comments down below if you think you want something different, or if you want me to review one of these games or play one of these or do something else. Certainly happy to. Got a whole nother 2 Calyxes and change over there beyond these of games, so please feel free to make some suggestions. If I've got the game and I haven't done anything, sure, I'd love to. I do this for fun. This is a hobby, but hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell icon and get alerted. Smash that thing, if you will. Yeah, because, hey, everybody likes to be liked. If there's something you don't like, feel free. Yeah. But I am more than happy to try to do some things a little bit differently. But I'm hoping that between the upper camera and this one, some of these things become a little bit clearer. And hopefully it's helpful to you. So hit those buttons, subscribe, all that stuff. Again, this is a hobby. This is fun. I really enjoy it. It's great. This is one of the ways I'd like to give back to the board game community because it gives me an outlet for community and fun and time with my friends and time with strangers at BGG, which is fantastic and awesome. And one of those things that we probably took for granted too much before COVID. But now, man. So, there's my 2 cents on that. All right. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.